Hello, welcome, please come in. It's time for another bonus episode, this time to celebrate a full year of weekly Friday releases. And as a reward for all that work I did, I decided to make more work. Yeah, I'm not really sure what's wrong with me. Anyway, some of you may be a bit confused as to what I mean by Pokemon style, so while the first few fights in the game pass by uneventfully in the background, let me explain myself. So this game gives the player the ability to invite monster-type units into your party via the orator class, and use items via the chemist class, and unlock additional monster skills on those monsters via the Beastmaster passive ability. So that is exactly what I will be doing. Ramza, our specialist boy, will have full access to the orator class, the chemist class, and the Beastmaster passive ability. The other 4 party slots will be filled out by a variety of recruited monsters, rather than humans. I've never really used monsters in this game. While some can be useful, or quite powerful, they don't really hold a candle to the power and versatility that human units can achieve in this game. So it's time to change that. Time to go on a monster rampage through Ivalice, and see how buffed up monsters fare against this game's considerable challenges. And yeah, this is going to be a bit of a wild ride. Anyway, first few fights aside, it's time to unlock Orator, which I definitely did legitimately. I absolutely did not just open up a save editor to manually unlock Orator so Ramza didn't end up super overleveled immediately. But with Orator unlocked and the Entice ability purchased, it's time to start adding monsters to my team. And my options are a bit limited, to say the least. But I start by picking up a Panther, not the most useful monster type, as their damage isn't especially good. And while they can cause poison, poison doesn't actually deal a ton of damage, and it expires in this game. Then a Goblin, which is also not great. Goblins are fairly slow and not particularly damaging. They can blind enemies, but the chance that blind actually hits is pretty low. At this point, I just need to fill out my roster. But if you're expecting goblins to stick around long term, well, that will not be happening. Next on my list is a Chocobo. This is the first of what I consider the best monster types in the game. Chocobos are fast and have very nice secondary abilities in the form of Choco Cure and Choco Meteor, depending on the type of Chocobo. And of course, Ramza can temporarily use them as mounts to improve his otherwise fairly limited movement ability. And recruiting some Chocobos took enough movement that I got a new Panther. See, in this game when you have monsters in your party, they have a random chance of laying an egg. This can either hatch into the same tier of monster, or a higher or lower tier. Monsters in this game have 3 tiers, and generally speaking, higher tier means better monster. So getting a tier 2 Panther this early is pretty good. Let's take that into the next actual story mission, the Siegeweld, which might be how you pronounce that. And this fight goes not great, if I'm being honest. I don't have any good ranged attacks on any monsters, but even the melee attacks aren't dealing that much damage. I also never unlocked Phoenix Downs on Ramza, so when one of my Chocobos dies early on, I can't actually do anything about it other than reset, which I decide is not worth it. Fortunately, Argith and Delita are in the fight, and are both fully equipped. And while my Chocobo isn't dealing a ton of damage, it does have an area heal ability that is exactly the extra healing I need to keep the rest of my party alive. So, that's my first lost monster, but that's okay. Monsters in this game are very replaceable. Back into the Siegefeld, and I can recruit another new monster, Skeleton. These have my first proper ranged attack in the form of Lightning Anima. They also have the ability to come back from the dead rather than fully dying when their death counter reaches 0. I'll give you one guess what happens to my Skeleton. And once more into the Weld, and this time I pick up a Minotaur. These are very beefy monsters. No ranged attacks, not great movement, but they have a lot of HP, and higher tiers get some very nice abilities. I will be using a Minotaur in some fashion for a while. And completing that recruitment gave Ramza enough JP to learn Enlighten, the first of the very useful Orator abilities. Enlighten has a very high chance of temporarily reducing the target's faith by 20, which translates to a permanent reduction of 5. Faith is used to determine the success rate of magic attacks, magic healing, and status effects, and both the caster and target's faith are calculated. However, monster skills, across the board, completely ignore faith, as do orator abilities and healing items, which means I have no reason not to reduce my character's faith stats as low as I can get them. I can, and do, a bit of grinding to lower my faith, But I will actually be doing most of that reduction in story battles, because Ramza has nothing else to do, really. By the end of the game, every one of my units is going to have faith in the single digits. Sorry, enemy spellcasters. And into Dorder. My units may not actually have great damage yet, but I do have better movement than I normally would. That fire spell just dealt 12 damage. Okay, having low faith is going to be great. The rest of the fight goes pretty easily. Between item healing, chocobo healing, and my rapidly dwindling faith, I am able to mostly go toe-to-toe with the enemy units. And because chocobos and panthers have such great movement, I can mostly outmaneuver the melee enemies here. My Minotaur can't move that fast, but considering it has twice as much HP as the rest of my team, that's fine. I'm very happy with my Minotaur bodying anything that comes close to it. And beating that fight gives Ramza enough JP to learn Praise, which has a much lower chance to raise Bravery by 4, which is a permanent +1. However, that's a lot more tedious to use, both because it's inaccurate and a smaller change, so I will use Praise a bit, but not a lot. Okay, time to switch back to Chemist. I need to get some JP to unlock better potions, and, most importantly, Phoenix Downs. Time for the next story battle, Zeklos Desert. And here is where I decide I'm going to try to use Praise to raise Bravery to boost my monster's damage. And I miss Praise so many times in a row, I decide that it's simply not worth it. The fight is otherwise pretty easy. The map itself serves to bottleneck enemies to prevent my limited healing from getting overwhelmed, and while the enemy team does consist of 2 archers, archer damage isn't actually that good this early in the game. It does take longer to wrap up than I'd like, because one of these stupid enemies has potions, but other than that, it's a pretty easy fight. And the next fight is against Meluda, and this is the first big battle where lack of ranged attacks becomes a big problem. All I need to do is drop Meluda to critical health, which in a normal playthrough is easy. In this playthrough, that is less true, because I have to let all the enemies come to me and then hope to take out Meluda before I get overwhelmed. Which does work, but not by much. And the next fight is against Meluda again, but this time I actually have to take out everyone. I haven't yet taken the time to get all my monsters' faith down to low levels, so these black mages are actually still fairly dangerous. It's also harder than I would have hoped to reduce faith and heal. And this is where I realized that skeletons can come back to life at 0, but don't always come back to life. So goodbye, skeleton. You weren't very good anyway. And of course, this will be the first of several instances where I get to play yo-yo with my character's lives via Phoenix Downs. It's not pretty, but it does get me through this fight. Next up is the first fight with Wygriff, which has all the normal problems. Wygriff can deal big damage, at range, and sometimes inflict statuses. And sword skills can't miss, and while that's bad enough, Wygriff's team is no joke either, consisting of high damage monks and high durability knights. Okay, that first attempt didn't go great. Let's give that another try. Yeah, that wasn't better. AoE status effects and damage that can't miss? This may be a bit of a problem. I think I just need to do some grinding. Levels don't matter a lot for humanoid characters in this game, but monsters have way better stat growths to make up for not having equipment. Is that a dragon? In the first random encounter, I did not know dragons even spawned on this map. Well, time to do some recruitment. Dragons are very strong and have decent movement. The basic level of dragon only has a basic attack, but higher tier dragons get very strong breath attacks. And that's a tier 2 dragon basically immediately. Well, that was lucky. I'm hopping into Zeklos Desert, both to grind and because getting a bomb enemy could be useful. They aren't very fast, but they do have float and ranged attacks. And yeah, that recruitment journey does not go great. Alright, there's a tier 2 Minotaur. Feral Spin isn't super useful, but getting a tier 2 means I'm more likely to get a tier 3 at some point. And tier 3 Minotaurs are very good for reasons I will get to. Time to give this Wygriff fight another attempt. And aside from the new monsters, I also have unlocked high potions to give me way better healing. And that boost to healing does a lot. And Blue Dragon and Better Minotaur both hit like trucks. It's still not a free fight, but that extra oomph was exactly what I needed. And now the final battle of Act 1. Wow, yeah, this has taken way longer than Black Mages only. I miss my big damage. This fight has some very dangerous mages, but thankfully my faith is starting to be low enough by default that the mages aren't too bad. Though they can target weaknesses. And while Ice Breath's 2 range isn't great, it is better than nothing. Ice Breath also deals more damage than the regular attack, so that's nice. This may also be the first time I've ever killed all the enemies here rather than just Argith. So that's fun. Not difficult though. Act 1 is done, but there's no slowing down. Actually, I probably want to speed this up a bit. Next battle in Dorter is mostly free, because Gaffgarion and Agrius are here, and they can probably solo this fight. Not actually sure on that. Not that my monster teams are a slouch. Dragon and Minotaur deal very nice damage. But Act 2 gives me my first big gift of the run. 2 adjacent blue locations. Because every time you move from one space to another, monsters have a chance to produce an egg to hatch into a new monster. And random battles don't happen on blue tiles. So, by moving back and forth between these two spaces, I can get a bunch of new monsters. It does mean spending a lot of time just moving back and forth, and releasing a lot of new monsters into the world, but all this running back and forth gets me a number of new and exciting monsters. Tier 3 Panther, which is actually not that useful. A Tier 3 Minotaur, which has an AoE attack and a self buff to increase its physical attacks. And a Black Chocobo, which can't heal and is less durable than yellow chocobos, but can fly and gets a very strong Choco Pellets attack. Well, I could run back and forth forever until I get everything I wanted. I don't want to do that, so it's time for the Aragway Woods, which is pretty uneventful. This is another fight made more or less irrelevant by Agrius and Gaffgarion. It is a nice opportunity to continue enlightening my monsters, so that's nice. And then Betrayal at the Zero-Kill Falls. Gaffgarion is now on the opposing side, but I get Delita, who is basically just as good. And this fight is more or less normal. Gaffgarion decides to spend just way too much time being out of range of my attacks, but having access to the item command means healing isn't really an issue. And while my Minotaur's movement is bad, I now have Beef Up to keep boosting its attack. So when it does hit, it hits real big. I wish I had some way to give monsters haste though. Really anything to boost their movement. I feel like that's the biggest issue I'm running into here. Onward to Zaland, where I need to rescue Mustadio. And Mustadio, as ever, decides to be debatably useful. And while most of my team lacks mobility, Black Chocobos being able to fly is a huge boon. And once my Dragon and Minotaur do get into the fight, they are able to deal very big damage. And all this fighting means I finally have enough spillover JP to learn Beastmaster. This unlocks an additional ability while a monster stands directly adjacent to Ramza. I'm a little unsure how useful this is actually going to be, but we'll see if I get any mileage out of it. Next up is the Belias Tor. This is the first instance of summoners in a playthrough, which could be fairly scary, but my faith stats are so low they can't really do anything. Also, the enemy loves to advance very quickly, meaning my normally poor mobility isn't actually an issue here. Next up is the Fenlands. This battle is actually pretty interesting, mostly because a large portion of the map is just water, and most of my team can't actually enter the water, for reasons. Fortunately, I get to make my first use of Beastmaster by letting my Black Chocobo use Choco Meteor, the most reliable monster ability in the entire game. But nothing else here is that interesting. Time for Gog, but first, I can finally buy a gun, because both Orator and Chemist can equip guns, which was an interesting choice that I very much appreciate. Once again, the only enemies here that are actually threatening are summoners, which are not threatening when I have my faith so consistently low. That's another battle down. Time to save Agrius, and yeah, this is mostly a one-sided mess. Agrius is already very strong, combined with a dragon, easy access to Choco Meteor, and a Chocobo that can also heal. Yeah, that definitely went better than it did in Black Mages only. If only because Agrius managed to not get herself killed like an idiot. Alright, bye Agrius. Barreling towards the end of Act 2, let's see how that goes. First up is the big battle at the execution site. The two time mages are basically ignorable. Gaffgarion is a problem though. He deals decent damage and can drain HP, which always makes him a bit of a pain, but it's even more of a pain when my damage isn't actually very good. In theory, I could buff up my Minotaur's attack to hit him for big damage, but this fight in particular doesn't really give me the room I need to do that, as I'm functionally surrounded. And the enemies swarm me just too fast to get any momentum built on my side, particularly when I don't actually have many attacks that affect an area. Alright, let's do some grinding, while I further drop my character's faith and try to think up an actual plan here. Is that a tier 3 dragon? Huh, that's convenient. Time to burn down some faith and get some levels. because more big dragons may, in fact, be what I need here. And yeah, turns out more dragons is exactly what I needed to get through this. I mean, the levels I got also helped. But dragons are quite strong for this point in the game, and the Dragon Breath attack means I can actually deal pretty decent damage against the enemy knights, which have just too much HP. And Gaffgarion is actually a two-shot, and with his range draining attacks removed from the equation, the rest of the fight is mostly uneventful. Then the Gates of Lionel Castle, which is a pretty tricky fight if you don't have a strong Ramza with good damage, which I do not. My plan in the first attempt is to get Ramza some help from the Black Chocobo to take down Gaffgarion, and then get back into the main portion of the fight. This does not go well for a few reasons. One is I'm actually just really unlucky on the fight and miss a lot of attacks that probably should have connected. The other issue is that the Black Chocobo actually just isn't that strong, so even though a Black Chocobo can hop the gates, that doesn't actually help that much. Alright, plan B. If Gaffgarion doesn't want to behave, I'll just bail, because it is time to make use of the ability to use Chocobos as mounts. Just fly my Chocobo over, and then fly away. Gaffgarion can't open the gate or get around it in any way, so he is no longer relevant. This means Ramza can move very quickly to help heal up my monsters, and they make pretty easy work of the other troops. Once that's done, I can open the gate and 5v1 Gaffgarion. Yeah, that was definitely the play. The gate is really supposed to isolate Ramza from the fight. It's very funny to turn that on its head. Which means the only fight left in this act is the final battle against Cuchulainn. And the starting formation, put all your characters so close together, isn't really fair, and ends up with half my party under the Doom status effect, which means time is ticking. The nice thing is that other than status effect, this Lucavi doesn't really have anything too dangerous, and as the first big boss fight, he also doesn't have that much HP. My dragons can burn down a lot of his health before my Minotaur can pop in with the buffed up Axe Strike to finish the fight. That is Act 2 done, 2 more to go. Okay, Oran, let's see if I can rescue you without you dying. Immediately getting crit is not a great start, my friend. Fortunately, the rest of the fight is pretty easy. The enemy group does have chemists, but they are very fragile and/or stopped. And Choco Meteor ignores elevation, and can't miss, which is very, very nice. Time to fight some church officials, which sounds interesting, but the enemy group doesn't have any ranged attacks, and the environment really works to hedge them into a tight approach. And Minotaur can spend the time waiting to buff its physical attack, so yeah, that's another pretty easy fight. That clears up another 2 blue spaces next to each other that are actually much faster to move between. So it's time for more wasting time trying to get some high-tier monster eggs. First success is a red Chocobo, which has Chocobo Meteor always accessible, and gets Choco Cure from Beastmaster. Very nice. Okay, let's head back to Orban and deal with the many difficult fights there. First is against these Dragoons and their helpers. The Dragoons are obviously the real issue here because they are both fairly durable and have great evasion to negate my attacks. Nice thing is that I now have 2 Chocobos that can use Choco Meteor, which cannot miss. Whoops, that Dragoon absorbs lightning. Should probably pay more attention to the damage screen before confirming, huh? Oh well, other than that, the fight is pretty simple. The Chemist dies very quickly, and the Time Mage's debuffs can't hit me with my low faith. Next up is the fight with Islud in the library, which is another interesting fight. Islud loves to use jump to deal big damage and become untargetable, and while he isn't super durable, he is more durable than I'd like. Fortunately, Choco Meteor once again saves the day by having perfect accuracy. I hope you don't get sick of me talking about 100 accuracy moves in this game, because it's kind of a big deal. Next is another fight against Wygriff. However, unlike last fight, he leads the enemy units, so he immediately hops into melee range so I can start hitting him with big attacks and meteors. And then I do a bit of a positioning error to try to stop him from running, and then miss an attack that would have ended the fight. Gonna have to try that again. My luck at the start is a little worse, with my black Chocobo getting stopped, but I get a lot luckier with my other attacks and actually hit Wygriff, bringing the fight to a swift close. So that was a lot better than I was expecting. Luso fight time! This addition to the War of the Lions version is normally kind of annoying. Behemoths are pretty chunky and Luso is a moron. However, because I want to recruit behemoths, this is actually super convenient. It's also a good time to use my latest ability, Tame. This support ability automatically recruits an enemy dropped into critical health by an attack, which makes it better than Entice because Entice's success rate is trash. Whereas Tame is guaranteed if you can just get an attack at the right time. Because of Luso, I only managed to recruit the tier 1 behemoth, but that's okay. I can always just get some eggs to get a higher tier version later. And that happened before I could even get to the next story mission, so gonna count that as a success. Behemoth Kings unlock the Twister ability through Beastmaster, which is actually a ranged area magic attack. The accuracy isn't great, but it's not bad, and the damage seems pretty decent. Wait, how does Twister damage get calculated? 1/3 of max HP? Oh, you're gonna be in the party for the rest of the game. Because while most enemies don't have that much HP, I know the later Lucavi fights can have real high HP totals. Boring nothing battle done, let's move on. Now the Yardo fight is kind of a mess. The summoners aren't a big threat because of my low faith, but the ninjas really take advantage of my limited healing and bad mobility. They can just dance circles around my entire party. And while Twister is a nice area attack, its damage is actually pretty bad against targets with such low HP. And of course, ninjas can dual wield, which means I get devastated very quickly. Okay, this is gonna take some doing, especially because Marok's spellcasting is actually the worst news to me because it uses the inverse of faith to calculate its efficacy, which means my low faith is now a big problem. But trying to keep my distance from the enemies to pick them off is really likely to get Rafa killed immediately. I'd love to say my winning attempt was because of great strategy and planning and doing anything right, but really it was just getting, frankly, stupidly lucky. Rafa's magic attacks and magic healing just perfectly hit exactly as they needed to get through the early parts of the fight. It then takes a bit of quick maneuvering to revive my monsters before some of them disappear, but that is the fight won, which I honestly was not expecting. Yugwood is next, and yeah, this fight is pretty easy this time around. Really any fight in this game that has a good number of enemy mages is a joke. Just having my faith so low and not impact my characters is really just a boon, because it really just breaks the combat design, which is very funny to me. Getting into the front gates of the next area is kind of a mess, at least initially. The archers have such strong ranged attacks and my mobility is not great. Combined with Marok being able to cast spells at me through low faith is just kind of a mess. I get completely bodied on my first attempt. Second attempt though, I realize I can do something a little different. First is that Rafa and Marok will both leave the fight if either gets in critical health, so I can just ignore them. And I can draw the knights and archers out of their perches by just hiding in the back corner. So that is what I do. Just wait for them to get close, kill them, and repeat. Not too bad. Next up is the final Wygriff fight. I wasn't sure how this fight was gonna go, since Wygriff is basically impossible to avoid and Ramza must fight alone. Thankfully his sword attacks deal just slightly less damage than I heal with X potions, which I get to use automatically thanks to Auto Potion. And now it's time to show off Twister, which immediately deals almost 400 damage. If I can get a few of those off, Okay, so my party is dead, and my behemoth got turned to stone. Not super surprising, given the Ultima demons and Belias' pretty terrifying ability to inflict statuses. Next attempt, Ramza dies on turn 2 because I have one high potion that I got as a reward that messes up my auto potion. Attempt 3, which is finally the attempt that does it. Despite getting confused and having to revive my behemoth, the fight goes my way. It probably shouldn't have, but the Ultima demons kept casting spells that hurt me, but also hurt Belias. And the little damage they contributed, combined with a second Twister, ends the fight. Alright then, I don't know why they kept hitting their boss, but I'm cool with it. Then the roof fight, where perhaps for the first time, Rafa actually carries her weight in this encounter. She manages to get off 2 spells on Elmdor and hits him 4 times, while my party just gets completely destroyed. Good for you, Rafa, finally doing your part. You can leave now. Into Act 4. At this point in my Black Mage's run, this was the halfway point of my recording sessions. Let's see if Pokemon Style can clutch up in Act 4, cause it's been a bit rough so far. And first up is this random encounter, which is mostly uneventful. The Knights and Dragoons are durable, but not durable enough, and the Black Mages are dealing single-digit damage. Time to see how the Meleadol fight goes. Why did they give her an accessory with re-raise if she's just gonna run away anyway? Oh well, pondering that took longer than the actual fight. Next is Fanath Creek, which has my favorite monster thus far, a lot of chocobos. And that means now I have to deal with getting hit with meteors. But other than that, the fight isn't too difficult. Chocobos suffer from not being particularly durable, which in this fight is good news for me, and bad news for all these dead chocobos. Time for a rematch against this churchman, and as usual, this fight is a whole lot of nothing because there are a lot of spellcasters that can't apply buffs, and all my best attacks bypass vertical height. So that was fast and boring. Insert joke here. And now it's time for my least favorite human in this game, Engineer Boy. And unlike Black Mages only, this fight is actually a real pain in the butt. Black Mages were able to basically burn him down before this fight could go anywhere. The problem is that my mobility and damage are both much worse. And while I almost take him out on my first attempt, he manages to get away while only Ramza is left alive and immobilized. So it's time to struggle. This fight is real rough because my healing is so limited. And Barrick loves to shoot my red chocobo, because it's my only unit he can deal decent damage to, because I haven't reduced its faith very much yet. It's a new red chocobo. But even if he does target someone else, he loves to inflict disable and immobilize, neither of which I can actually cure with remedies. My winning attempt, I end up turtling up in a corner trying to draw out enough of the other troops that I can take them down until Barrick is all alone. And yeah, this took a while. Once again, Barrick adding huge chunks to my recording time. Don't get too excited, Barrick. We'll meet again in Muland, and by then, I'm gonna have a fun surprise for you. Okay, let's see if Besselat is gonna be a bit less of a pain than the last time. First, choose the north side. This isn't the side I meant to choose. This side has archers and ninjas. I don't want this. This side sucks. Let's hop back in, but to the side I actually meant to be on. Not that this side is actually that much easier. There are a lot of physical attackers that can actually deal some big damage, but this side has a summoner, which is a nothing character, and most importantly, no ninjas. And the fewer ninjas I run into in my life, the better. I really wish these chocobos were a bit more durable. I'm getting a bit tired of getting stuck in revival loops with both my chocobos constantly dying, but having two chocobos casting chocobo meter is just too effective. It's just such a reliable attack in any encounter. And now the stupid sluice. This fight is such a pain. With archers in unfavorable terrain, and while X potions are pretty good for healing, I would give a lot to have a more reliable healing method than that, and Choco Cure. First attempt does not work out, with my entire team getting devastated. Back into the fight, but with a new plan this time. If I bunch up my troops, I can much more reliably heal them and fight off enemies. And the Black Mages can hit an area, but can't actually deal much damage to me. And my black chocobo goes down. You know what? I think it's time to hop on my chocobo again. This will improve my movement, and mean I have one fewer chocobo to try to keep alive for a bit. It's not really practical because you lose a unit, but being able to ride chocobos is such a cool mechanic in this game. Especially since the red chocobos have ignore height, and black chocobos can fly. Now that I have my footing, it's basically just a cleanup of slowly advancing to take out the last few units. Mount Germanus. More ninjas. Exactly what I didn't want. Fortunately, there is only one, and because both my chocobos can ignore heights, it's actually not nearly as bad as it otherwise could be. Even when my Behemoth gets charmed, that's actually probably a benefit, because it means the enemy isn't attacking it. Okay, then the red chocobo gets charmed, which is definitely less good, but all that nonsense gave me time to get my party close together, which means Choco Cure is more effective, and Ramza can more easily use Phoenix Downs and potions. So yeah, that was a lot easier than it could have been, despite the enemy continuing to use charm throughout the fight. And then Poescus. Normal strategy for this area: hide in a corner to bait the enemy to advance. This makes the archers considerably less dangerous, and the spellcasters are basically nothing against the weight of my very low faith scores. And it's time for nonsense. This random encounter, reached by entering the Belias Tor from Zaland in Act 4, is perhaps the hardest random encounter in the game. The game will even give you a few guesses in the fight on your side. I got a chocobo and a behemoth. But that's not what I'm here for. This is the only random encounter where hydra show up outside the Midlight Deep. And I want a hydra. Ideally, the strongest hydra I can get, but really any will do. The monsters in this fight are also a decently higher level than me, and every single one is pretty terrifying. But I have my full team ready, and a gun with the tame ability. It's close, but I managed to tame the greater hydra. Then feed it some X potions to get it back into the fight, and the reason I wanted to recruit a hydra becomes very, very obvious, because that damage is stupid. And the greater hydra manages to neatly mop the floor almost by itself. So yeah, this is my new favorite party member. Time to spend a bit of time in lightening down its faith, and while I do, I'll also point out that in addition to the comically strong Tri-Flame attack, hydras can also fly and have like 50% more HP than any of my other units. Oh yeah, we zooming into the endgame now. And that starts in Limberry, leading with the party I will mostly be using for the entire rest of the game. The first fight can be a bit scary because of the assassins and the various demons' abilities to devastate the party. However, I keep my hydra out of range on turn 1 and then pop in and finish the fight with a Tri-Flame. Then another fight with the assassins and Elmdor. One important thing about Tri-Flame is that it hits in a cross formation and randomly attacks 3 squares, but it doesn't have any vertical tolerance, so if I can get on uneven ground, it's actually way better for me. And the Hydra itself is never a viable target, so I can remove a possible square of targeting. And while I end up taking out Ramza, that is enough to win this fight on the second attempt without too much trouble. I'm having a lot of fun with this. Next up is a fight that can be difficult. Argith can drain HP and is surrounded with demons with big spell areas, and sadly their spells bypass Faith. And Argith goes down almost immediately to a sequence of Tri-Flame, Choco Pellet, and Fire Breath. Amazing. Time for another Lucavi, which means it's once again time to show off Twister. And Tri-Flame. Wow, that was a lot of damage right out the gate. Most of my party is now stopped, and remedies won't fix that. Now I'm sad. Let's run it back and try again. And yeah, that was basically a fluke. Second attempt goes perfectly. Lucavi having big health bars means big damage when that is a percentage hit. And smart positioning on the final Tri-Flame means it has to hit 3 times in a row, which actually deals more damage than Twister. Oh, Hydras, you're so silly. Back to Egros to continue this comical trail of destruction. Time to deal with Isodark, who is a bit dangerous because he has sword magic. Not sure why he brought a bunch of knights in this very vertical map, but that's fine. Well-placed Tri-Flame ends phase 1, and it's time for a Dremelech. Another Lucavi with a lot of HP. Twister deals 500 damage per hit, so that's pretty nice, except then he keeps confusing Ramza and the Behemoth, which is fine because that means he's not doing anything against the way more dangerous Hydra. And that's the fight done. Before I head into the final fights, I do actually want to grab another Hydra, because tier 3 Hydras have another ability I really want. Actually, 2 abilities. One that hits 6 times instead of 3 and can inflict statuses on top of the damage it deals, and the other which deals damage, with 100% accuracy, that is equal to half the target's max HP. Yep, it's just Twister, but localized, and stronger, and more accurate. And there is my Tiamat. And we'll test out the Tiamat in the next story mission in Muland. Yeah, that'll do. This fight is very easy. The enemies here are not especially dangerous, period, and the only real strength they have is decent evasion. And I don't really care what they think their evasion is going to be, because no, actually, you can't evade me. Then a fight against 3 special NPCs, none of which are especially threatening, and I only need to bring down 1, which I do, very quickly. Alright, what nonsense is next? Oh right, Zombie Zalbog. Thanks, Dark Whisper, you did great. Other than that comedy of errors, nothing interesting here either. Alright, all that's left is the final sequence of fights, and the first fight is even easier than I'd expected. This map is very uneven, which makes targeting enemies with Tri-Flame and Dark Whisper incredibly easy, which means none of these enemies can last any amount of time. Who is next? Oh right, you! And you brought a bunch of mages. That was not wise, considering my faith is non-existent. Sadly, the main enemy moved back instead of forward, so I will have to actually deal with the random enemies. And the ground here is level, which makes Tri-Flame a lot less accurate, but that's okay. Nothing here has any real way to impact me. Up next is Cletion, who comes with a bunch of ninjas and samurai, which isn't actually nothing on the difficulty level, especially with how obnoxiously flat this terrain is. But none of these enemies are actually that durable, and Cletion decides running into a corner will keep him safe. It does not. And it's time for Engineer Boy, who is basically built exactly the way I am, having a cadre of monsters with the same devastatingly overpowered abilities. My first attempt, I try to rush in, and it goes badly, because my low faith can't actually protect me from the same attacks I am using. Back into the fight, and realize I need to actually bait out Barrack into advancing. Between X potions and Choco Cure, I actually have a lot more healing, so I won't just get devastated. And yeah, second attempt goes basically exactly as I wanted, so that was nice and easy. Another Lucavi in the form of Ashmal. He immediately stops half my party, and again, remedies can't fix time magic, but half my party is still more than enough, especially when Twister can deal 1/3 of his health in one attack. And it's final boss time. Ultima. Phase 1, I need to bait Ultima into getting close, but then I can use Tri-Breath, which deals half the target's max HP and damage, and can't miss. Then Twister to deal another 1/3. My best Hydra does go down, but a Tri-Flame takes out the rest of Ultima's HP, and it's time for Phase 2. Which kind of turns into a joke. I spend the entire fight using Phoenix Downs on my Tiamat so I can take out large chunks of HP with Tri-Breath. But while it gets off one Tri-Breath for max damage, I then spend the rest of the fight reviving it repeatedly, because all Ultima does is teleport in, kill it, teleport out. I was wondering why Ultima did nothing but physically attack Tiamat instead of using any of its dangerous abilities, but on review, all of his strong attacks are magical, and based on faith. So, for the final fight, Ultima's only real option is to just keep killing my Tiamat, because he can't kill anyone else with his attacks, and none of his other abilities will actually do anything. This takes a bit because Twister keeps missing, but I'm actually in no danger. And when Twister does hit, it still deals a max damage. Guess Ultima has at least 3000 HP. Or had. Well, that was very interesting. Final Fantasy Tactics beaten Pokémon style. The difficulty of that run started off fairly high, then got a bit easier, then got quite challenging, then the difficulty fell out from under me as three-headed dragons arrived on the scene. Seriously, Hydras are so much stronger than any other monster in this game. It's kind of ridiculous. But, oh well, that was a fun bonus run. I did want to shout out that I do have a Patreon, linked in the description. I spend a lot of time making these videos, so if you enjoyed the video, want to support the channel, and are financially stable enough to do so, that exists. No pressure though, this channel is free to enjoy for everyone, and will remain that way. For now, if you liked this video, be sure to hit the like button. If you'd like to see more of this, feel free to subscribe. Hey, maybe leave a comment if you have something you'd like to say. But whatever you decide to do, have a safe trip home.